What to do, what to do. This is the Brothers on Books podcast, where we find great books that will give you real value and actionable steps and have fun in the process. Please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you would like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to would be greatly appreciated. Lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. Finally, we've recently partnered with Encha Matcha, the best matcha for the best brothers. And now our listeners will get 10% off when they use the code or link provided in the show notes with this episode. I'm Alex Elwile, and with me as always is my brother Jack. Jack, how you doing today?
Doing great, Al. Any morning where I get to discuss a good book with you is a great morning.
And what book are we discussing?
Today, we are discussing, after years of hearing about this book, Bill Perkins' Die with Zero, Getting All You Can from Your Money and Your Life.
Okay, so how did you, this was one of your picks?
This was one of my picks in the book draft. I've heard of this book for a few years now. I first heard of it from a buddy, and it really seemed to shape a lot of his views, but I don't know how much action he was actually taking. So I was curious what it was. And then I'd also heard about it a lot from people that attend the personal finance convention, FinCon. It seems to be a very popular book to talk about because it clashes a lot with, I would say, the FIRE movement, this financial independence, retire early movement, where they're mostly interested in optimizing the money part. And this seemed a little bit more holistic and optimizing your life, optimizing your experiences, as he says. So what were your first impressions, or maybe impressions after finishing?
Oh yeah, so I feel like the main focus on the book is that most individuals, or at least my main takeaway was most individuals, sorry, uh, focus on the wrong thing, which is, yeah, what you just said, the maximization of wealth accumulation instead of like life satisfaction. And it's an interesting point that he brings up sort of some of these anecdotes of people that are like 70 that are like still trying to just make more and more money when at that point, like what are you really going to use it for? He shows some very they're not like super detailed graphs, but I think even from the graphs you can get the gist. They're just essentially hand-drawn graphs that show that really as you age, the benefit you can get out of your money kind of decreases, and that has to do with your more or less your declining health and or maybe you're in at some point in your life probably lack of time, but when you're older it's really just you're not as up to doing a lot of the things that you would enjoy when you were younger.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what was your main takeaway?
Yeah, I think we'll get into it. But yeah, I mean, what good is wealth without health? I guess I would sum up the whole book, because your health diminishes over time, and it takes more and more dollars to get that same excitement that you could have, earlier on in your life, and that certain experiences need to be bucketed at certain times in your life because you're only able to, or only have the energy to at certain points in your life, or the desire to, because he goes through a lot how old people, they don't really have a desire to travel. A lot of them just want to stay close to home, watch Jeopardy, Golden Girls, whatever. And your tastes change over time, and you should get the most of life, at these time buckets as you can. I don't know.
Yep, yep.
You want to just go chapter by chapter?
Right, but just really piggybacking off what you just said, like how your tastes change after time. He brings up the point of he had a good friend that went backpacking through Europe when he was like in his early 20s, took
Mhm.
out like essentially a loan from he's made out to be some type of mafioso to go do this. and he's backpacking through Europe, he's staying in these hostels, doing all these things, and he was talking about how what you want to do changes. And I was thinking, yeah, like even at this point in my life at 33, I don't think I would really want to go stay in a hostel anymore. Uh,
I
but I look,
remember, so I took a similar trip when I was like in 2016 going through Europe. I did not take dead out to go on this, but I did stay at a couple hostels, and after like one night, I was done. Like, nah. So that was even back then. So I just remember sharing a room, and they were being loud and drinking, and I'm just like, nah.
right. I was thinking back to when we went to for those of the listeners that don't know, we went to the 2014 World Cup. And I just remember that one hotel room we stayed in that just had the four single beds with no sheets.
No
Uh
sheets, mold in the
no
shower, no
shower.
hot water.
Right. And I remember I would have been I would have been like 23 at the time, and I remember thinking, man, this is not for me.
Yeah.
So even when we were in I mean, when you and I went through Scandinavia, I feel like we stayed at some sort of cheaper Airbnbs, but I mean, it was just me and you, so it was relatively fine.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't think I would want to be staying in hostels right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so what chapter did you want to start with?
Let's start at one.
Okay.
So chapter one was optimize your life, maximize your positive life experiences. And he did talk about, what good is wealth without health, or to have the correct experience at the correct age. I thought it was interesting. He brought up the book, Your Money or Your Life. So that was a book I had read years ago that did talk about money in terms of like your life's energy. And that's kind of how I view money now. Like every time I'm either trying to make it or it's getting accumulated, I'm like, okay, this is like saving me or freeing up time in some way or giving me time. Um, not really giving, but you get the sense like it's freeing up space to do other things. Um,
Yeah, or even the concept of I don't think he really talks about it, or if he does, I'm not remembering it. But essentially farming out chores. I think he does talk about it.
he
Farming out
does.
chores that cost less than like your hourly rate. Like, why
Mhm.
would you, if it takes you, 4 hours to do something, and you can pay someone, $50 to do it, 4 hours of your time is worth like $100. Like, why would you spend the time doing it?
Uh-huh.
You should just go, live your life and do other things.
This one I would maybe push back like slightly in certain ways, and I would at least be curious what he says, like mowing your lawn. Like this was something I used to pay someone to do, but like the last couple months, I've actually started doing it myself, and it does take me like maybe an hour to do, but I do get a lot of steps in, and so it is improving my health. I feel, I mean, marginally. Always feel better after cutting the lawn and it's kind of unexpected. Now I don't really feel that like I'm doing like laundry, but I guess it comes back to like it's being intentional and like understanding like what you do and don't like. But I guess it's really farming out the things you really don't like. But I don't know. I was kind of surprised that I kind of like cutting the lawn.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you really are a mom's son because you are the only two people I know that have ever said that.
Yeah.
Because I hate it. When
So
I
that's a win-win. I get to save a little bit of money and
You feel good about
put
yourself.
a smile on my face, get some steps in. So yeah, so at the end, I mean, I think one of the recommendations was, he wanted you to think about what life experiences would you like. So are there any like experiences that like came to mind, particularly after reading this, like things that you want to do now or long term?
Uh, I mean, the thing that always comes back to me is I would like to, I mean, life experience. I guess when I hear life experience, first thing to me that pops out is travel.
Hmm.
Uh, And I still would really, I mean, I've wanted to go for probably going on 5 years now. I really wanted to go to both Australia and Greece.
Okay, great. Okay.
And
I
I've, and
literally
I,
wrote down go to Australia.
okay. And I've yet to do either. So those are two of the big ones that I have. And like why I have, I mean, I could at this point, I feel Australia would be harder. I think Greece I could do pretty easily,
Yeah, I
but
agree.
I just still haven't. And it's like,
Hmm.
why haven't I done it? I haven't taken the time to really plan it out. Or the other question is, do I actually want to go, or do I just say that?
Hmm.
So it's hard to say. So those were the two travel experiences that are high on my list that I've been putting off for at this point years now.
Okay.
What about yourself?
I did put Australia. I said after my most recent trip out west, I kind of want to do more trips out west, and I put drive out west at least once, and perhaps go to Alaska because there was that one time in college where we even mapped out a route to Alaska. I think it was like 60 some hours of driving, and I
66
know,
hours from Ann Arbor.
yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but I do think I kind of want to do that once. I did put build a house, and I put get proficient in at least one language, probably in German.
I
So
guess you don't count English as being proficient in.
one new language. Okay. Okay, so chapter two was, I mean, kind of piggybacking what we were just talking about, invest in experiences. Start investing in experiences early. And the business of life is the acquisition of memories, he says. Um, and he kind of questions, or he states that our culture overemphasizes the virtues of what he called the ant, the oversaver, of hard work and delayed gratification at the cost of other virtues. And he's kind of saying we need to find a balance between, saving for a rainy day and experiencing now. So I guess
So he puts
the first question I had is, do you think our culture does overemphasize like hard work and delayed gratification?
so it's weird that he says that. So he's telling this through the story of I think it's Aesop's fable, the grasshopper and the ant,
Yep.
right? Where the grasshopper plays all summer and the ant like harvests nuts or whatever all summer for the winter. And then comes the time for the winter, the grasshopper has no food and the ant is, just has plenty of food. Uh, I would say the people I'm sure Bill Perkins hangs out with probably do overemphasize being the ant, being incredibly hard workers that save a lot. But I think I would say the average American is the grasshopper. And I think this is why a lot of Americans financially struggle is because they can't delay gratification and that they just take what they want immediately. They want immediate gratification. I think that's part of the problem. Same with it's like and the everyone needs the immediate what's the dopamine kick. And
Hmm.
that's why those like reels and shorts are so popular. I think is because people just want that like 30-second like dopamine kick constantly. And that's essentially the inability to have delayed gratification.
Hmm. Well, how would you kind of view that with like some of the charts I think he shows later on of like net worth is like continuing to increase even into 70s, like the median net worth. Because like that would say to me like, yeah, we are kind of over saving. Or when are they going to start, pulling down?
Well, I think I think part of that is because a lot of people are you have you do have assets and the assets do continue to grow. So even if your
Hmm.
net worth is going down, you're paying down. Most Americans at some point will buy a house, so your house will probably increase in value. Uh, so at some point, your net worth is still going up. I don't think that, I guess if you say they're oversaving, I still think most people will prioritize immediate gratification over delayed gratification.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
but
And
but like
then
the
go
the the fire people, I think you're right. Like there are people, I mean, I used to do this. Like I used to think about in terms of if I spend $5 now, you know, that's the equivalent of like $25 and what, like, how long does it take your money to 5 times at 8%? I don't remember the calculation.
5 times.
Yeah.
What would be 9 years to double, basically?
Okay, so I think
So
whatever.
you need like almost three doubles.
Yeah, so 15 years. Close. Or not, sorry, 27 years.
Hmm. Something like that, yeah.
So I used to like think about in terms of like how many, if spending $5 now is worth to me like how many dollars when I'm 60. And it's like
Hmm.
that's how much money at retirement. Yeah, sorry. I did used to think like that. And I think it has its benefits in some regards because it makes you cognizant of how much money you're spending, but it also takes away from like what you want to do at a given moment.
Hmm. Hmm.
Did he have charts in this book?
On
Or sorry, in this chapter?
um
Oh yeah, he is the dividend, the
memory dividend.
fulfillment, yeah, the memory dividend.
Yeah, this was the chapter he introduced the memory dividend. And that's the idea that not only do your perhaps stocks pay a dividend, but experiences pay a dividend over time. So like if you had an early experience, you'd get hopefully even he's saying even negative sometimes experiences, like if you go out of your way to have them, they still produce like a positive thought like down the road. So like if you had an experience this year, like not only next year, but the year after and so on and so forth, you would have, a dividend from that initial memory. And you kind of want to like stack up these experiences to get higher and higher memory dividends down the road.
Yeah, I thought he was sort of saying like it pays, like it's paying you in like joy, like positive
Yep.
emotion almost.
Yep.
And a good example of that is when I guess for those of the people listening that don't know, we were in Sweden in 2016,
Hmm.
and our car was broken into in 2016, and Jack had the privilege of having his clothes ruffled through and not stolen,
Yep.
and I had the privilege of having my passport stolen.
Hmm.
Uh, and then that whole like fiasco, even though at the time it was sucky, it's like now kind of a funny story.
Yep.
And I feel like we both have probably gotten some joy out of retelling that story,
Yep.
even though it was a very unpleasant situation.
Yeah, all of my wife's friends that talk about it being uneasy or unsafe in America, I always talk about that store. Yeah, actually, I've never been robbed like that in America, but now in Brazil we had stuff taken, and when we
Sweden,
were in Sweden,
Malmo.
yeah.
Yeah, the Brazil one, I don't think people will probably care about, but the Sweden one for sure, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
they
I mean,
broke
someone
the
busted our
in the
window, busted
window,
our
right?
window, glass everywhere, and yeah. Okay. Okay, so the chapter 3 is why die with zero, and the rule for this one is aim to die with zero. And this, I think, talks to the person that keeps extending the goalpost, kind of like it's never enough. And he even has the quote, once you're in the habit of working for money to live, the thrill of making money exceeds the thrill of actually living. And then he talks about this concept that if you have enough and you die, you've essentially worked for free according to how much in excess you have. And he brought up the stat that a third of all retirees actually increase their assets after retirement. So that's kind of interesting. That basically means they didn't start. They're not starting early enough, according to him, because they're not gonna die with zero.
I think is this the chapter where he talks about yeah, he talks about worrying about medical costs at the end
Yeah.
of your life. So he makes a good point. Like, you essentially work your entire life, and let's say at the end you have 250 grand, and he brings up the point that a night of medical care could cost $50,000. So should you really prioritize, like in your mind, should you prioritize 5 nights of medical care at the end of your life or enjoying the $250,000? Like, should you
Hmm.
plan for that? And I feel like I remember thinking this when I was so at some point I don't have the exact quote. He says like when you're old, you're on I always get these confused. I think it's Medicare when you're
Hmm.
older.
Yep.
Right. So at some point he says if the cost is that much, you'll either die or the government will pay for it. And I remember thinking when I was probably 24 and I was making like I would have been making like 30 grand a year. I remember seeing like some of my maximum out-of-pocket cost for insurance was like 10 grand. And I remember
Okay.
thinking if I had a $10,000 medical, like I just remember thinking if I have to pay up to $10,000, like why am I even paying for insurance? Because I'm not going to be able to afford this. So like what's even the point? Like what's the point of the insurance? So
Hmm.
either the government will foot the bill or I just won't get the care. And I
Hmm.
feel like that's kind of how our healthcare system should. I mean, I think that's how people should look at it, especially at the end, um, whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah. And he even brings up different insurance. And that's the point of insurance. A lot of this can be quantified. If you're super scared of certain care at end of life, there's long-term care insurance. If you're worried about outlasting your money, you could look into annuities, which would pay you a stream of income over time. Um,
So yeah, the annuities were interesting. So I feel like, I mean, this is somewhat of a tangent, but I feel like he brings up no one ever talks about those. But
a lot of people get annuities. A lot of insurance companies provide annuities because it's basically the other side of the risk curve. You can think of so life insurance, a person is basically protecting against mortality risk, right? They're worried about dying too early. An annuity, a person is worried about living too long, so they call that longevity risk. So insurance companies like having a mix of both because they're separate risks and they sometimes offset each other a little bit. But you also think like the people that are more inclined to buy annuities are probably healthy and actually know something that they think they're going to live really long. So they use different mortality tables depending with on whether you're getting like an insurance policy or an annuity policy. But from what I've seen, I mean, this is just my opinion, but just like a bond. So the risk, if you have a bond, is basically they're fixed payments coming back to you, right? So what would eat into that? Well, inflation would eat into that. So if they're not inflation protected, they might not seem as good. Like you might say, like, oh yeah, $500 a month for life. Like, yeah, it might sound like a little bit, a good bit now, but 30 years down the road, is $500 a month really helping? Like, probably not that much. So like it depends if, and I haven't seen that many that are inflation adjusted. So I don't know. That's something to look into, but he doesn't really go into specifics yet because he says like, yeah, you could. There are whole books written on annuities.
okay, so I was saying like I get the insurance angle, but I was talking about like financial planners. I feel like he was saying no one ever talks about that, and that's because you're taking money out of management, correct?
Yeah, because they would a lot of those financial advisors work under an asset under management model where they're just getting a percentage. So if you take out $1 million to go buy an annuity, they're no longer getting a percentage of that $1 million because now it's stationed at the insurance company. The insurance company's investing it now. So another thing, so you kind of talked about the healthcare stuff, and this was the part that was like probably most shocking to me, but the spending among American households declines as people age. And he says it's even including healthcare. And so he said, so this is a 2017 study, and it's average spending by households headed by, and then he's got these age buckets. And the 55 to 64-year-old group, the average spending was 65,000. 65 to 74 actually went down to 55,000. And then the 75 plus was 42,000. And that includes healthcare. So that was kind of surprising because I feel like people in their mind, they always think like, I need to save so much money because like my expenses are going to get higher as I get older. But he's saying, no, that's not true. The stats don't back that up. So that's an interesting thing that you can put into like if you're making projections or you could kind of, look at sliding down because I think he said most of it was the clothing and entertainment. Old people like the money goes way down on those expenditures.
I mean, I feel like we sort of talked about this off camera last night, but I think the big one is probably when you get into the older age ranges, like 70 plus, most people have paid off. If you're in a house, you probably have paid off your house, and that so you no longer have a
That's
like a mortgage.
yeah, possible for sure. Yeah.
Were you surprised? I'm on page 51. Were you surprised by the median net worth by age of household?
Um, so this is a chart going from basically 0 at age 20 to it looks like 250,000 by age 75, and it's basically always increasing. I mean, I don't know what year this was, but yeah, if this is relatively recent, a 35-year-old only having like a net worth of 50,000,
$50,000.
that
Right.
does sound low to me, but I guess this would maybe support your statement that yeah, we're maybe more grasshoppers than ants. Because that it does seem low.
I mean, even at 75, it's 250. Or
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
I think maybe I mean, I've accused some people of being out of touch of reality before, but maybe I'm a little out of touch with reality of
Yeah.
the average American.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Okay, so good on chapter 3. You want to bring up anything else?
hmm. I mean, I guess the main takeaway from this is that you should start cutting into your net worth earlier, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so chapter 4 was how to spend your money without actually hitting zero before you die. And the rule number 4 is use all available tools to help you die with zero. So this one was kind of fun. He's talking about tools to help with your projections. He brings up this final countdown app that actually will, you'll get like expected death date, and then you'll have the days to live. So I don't know. Did you play around with these?
So I think when I was reading this, I took the expected longevity test.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I think you did that as well, right?
I did. Which one did you use? Because
I did not use the one that I just went, I think I did Northwest Mutuals.
okay. Okay, I think I
That
did that one too. I wrote down, and this really depends where you go because depending on where you go, the mortality tables they use are going to be different. So, like, for example, the Social Security Administration, he didn't mention this, but I went on their site and they only differentiate on male and female and birth date. That's it. So they don't ask if you're a smoker. They don't ask how much you exercise. So this is like a real like population average just with those splits. And the total years I got was about 82. But like I said, that's like the whole population of America. But like I think I got 91 at Northwestern. John Hancock, I got 93. And then this blueprintincome.com, I got 98.
Oh,
So there's a
wow.
pretty big deviation. And then the one he mentioned, which is through the Society of Actuaries, it's longevityillustrator.org. This one's probably is the best because it doesn't just give you the average, but it gives you the distribution. So, like, for example, it gave me a 66% chance of living to at least 85, a 48% chance of at least to 90, and then an 8% chance of living to 100.
Okay.
So it's and you can kind of play around with it and just like, go from male to female. So like, okay, so for like here, well, I'm gonna just click female real quick and see how so like so for a 35-year-old male, it gave me a 66% chance of getting to 85 or more. But like if you're a female and everything else is the same, it gave a 76. So a 10% increase of getting to age 85. So it's kind of cool to like play around and see the different distributions. But yeah, this could potentially help you plan um, by age and how likely you are to get to each age.
I guess yeah, I just did the Northwestern one, and I think it said 86 for me. I did not
Hmm.
look at those other ones. Uh, I guess the main takeaway was this: the whole point of this is this to help you plan for how to spend your money till
Hmm.
your end of days. And essentially, what we were just talking about, he was saying if you're nervous about running out of money, you should just go buy an annuity. That's, I
Hmm.
guess, his recommendation to give you
Yeah,
that
or
constant.
yeah, or if you're scared of like Alzheimer's or dementia treatment, like get long-term care insurance. There's all these different insurances that you can get. Um, and I actually did type in like if I were to die in 2078, that gives me about 19,700 days to live. So like when you start thinking about like how many days, and that's what that final countdown app does, I think essentially it looked like you had to pay some money on the app store to get that, but it kind of just brings it into focus like, yo, like I need to take today seriously because I only have like so many more days left.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird putting your life in the measure of days, right? Like,
Hmm.
because saying you have, upwards of 50 some years left to live, like that sounds right. Like that sounds like a lot. That sounds like a ton.
Hmm.
Just because I feel like you can't quantify, because I mean we haven't one lived 50 years, but like it's hard. That's hard to imagine. But like putting it in terms of like days, like you can visualize a day pretty easily. I can visualize 30 days.
Uh-huh.
Right now I'm visualizing right now in my mind I'm visualizing like 15 weeks because that's how many weeks I have left for the year.
Okay.
Uh so I don't know. It's like it does give you a certain like carpe diem. I think that's the
Yep.
Marine phrase, right? Yeah.
Yep. And he was even describing this study, I think it was with college students where they're told like, okay, you only get like 30 more days to have like these types of experiences. And like the other group wasn't given that speech. And the people that were told, you only have 30 days left, they
What's
seem to make more of an effort to get pack in the experiences that are really gonna pay dividends down the road. And they had like
30
happier recollections of the 30 days.
I think it was 30 days and then you're moving across the country.
Ah, okay, yeah.
And it was like how you're going to go about uh like living those 30 days, like who you're going to see.
Hmm.
And he said that, and that actually really resonated with me because I remember when I graduated, when I was graduating
Hmm.
from grad school.
Hmm.
I think the last, uh, I mean, my actual like writing my dissertation and practicing the defense and all that was not pleasant, but those last like 3 months were probably some of like the best months of my life. Like, how many new friendships I had, like how much I interacted with people. I felt like I was incredibly social, just constantly seeing my friends. I had like a great time.
Hmm.
And I felt like it was sort of because of that, because I knew like soon I was going to be leaving and I wasn't going to be able to see these people on a daily basis like I was used to.
Yeah, you kind of equates it to like vacation mode. Like when you go on a vacation, like like, okay, I only have like 10 days. I need to get the most of these 10 days. Whereas like when you're back at your home base, sometimes you take it for granted and like it's never gonna end. So you don't really pack in the experiences or go or you're not as intentional with what you're doing each day or who you're seeing, who you're spending time with.
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. So
Okay.
should we move on to chapter
Yeah.
5?
Yeah. So chapter 5 is what about the kids? Give money to your children or to charity when it has the most impact. So why wait to give to your kids until you die? So why might people want to wait until they die?
Well, that would piggyback off of what I feel like we just talked about is they're worried about running out of money.
Uh-huh.
That's I think why people historically wait, right?
I think that, and then I also like the point he brings up that perhaps people are worried about their kids squandering it. Um,
So he
and
touches on that though.
he does, and he did a Twitter poll where over it says 3,500 people voted when the best time to get inheritance would be, and people responded, and the heavy winner, over 50% of the respondents said in the 26 to 35-year-old group, and the thought was this is old enough to be responsible but still young enough to get the most of it and provide the most impact. And honestly, like I was thinking, like right now, yeah, I feel like I'm responsible enough that if something were to come my way, I would not just squander it. Like I would have an exact plan. I'd either pay down certain debt or invest in a certain way, sell options. I basically have an idea in my mind of what I would do if I got money. And he brings up the average inheritance date is like 60 years old. And by 60 years old, like I mean, you're probably financially stable. I mean, you mentioned you might have your house paid off by then. So you're not getting as big of an impact when you're older versus when you have health or you have some legitimate like money concerns that really could benefit from an injection.
Yeah, so I was thinking the exact same thing. I had never really thought about that, but then when I read this, we're both in that age range, and I thought like, yes, an injection of just cash right now would have a massive impact on my life. Like, I could probably pay off at least some of my houses, and then that would have a downstream effect because then it would be easier to pay off the other houses.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep. Free
so
up
I
the
was
cash, lower your interest payment going out. Yeah, absolutely.
so I was talking with I brought this book up to one of my coworkers, who's I mean he's a chemist, his wife is a dentist, and I brought that concept up to him, and he told me that his wife's family essentially did this.
Hmm.
She had a lot of dental school debt, and they, out of their business, they more or less gave her inheritance at like 30, and she
Hmm.
was able to pay off all of her dental school debt, and that's like freed up so much money for them, and it's like enabled them to like really enjoy their life a lot more because they don't have to make these. they don't may have to make these student loan payments for the next, 20 or 30 years.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a good story in this book about, I think, a mom going through a divorce, and like in her 30s, she was really struggling, and then she eventually got a fairly big inheritance at, I think, around 60. But by that time, she was much more financially stable. She didn't really have a lot of these concerns, and she was talking back about how if the person that was giving her this money had always had the intention of giving it to her, I mean, even a lower amount back then would have been more impactful than, receiving it at 60. So it's kind of interesting. It's all about being like intentional and um impactful.
Right. I mean, even I feel like, recently you've heard some stories about friends that have had their like parents help them with houses, just like getting a start. Like, and it's just such a
Uh-huh.
big, uh, especially right now. I feel like people don't understand how hard it is to pay. Like interest rates are like 6.5 to 7% right now. Like people should really think about like what paying 6.5 to 7% on a $200,000 house per year is. That equates to about, 12 to $14,000 a year, not even including not even including principal
Hmm.
or taxes and insurance. Like that's a massive amount of money. So having help with a house is it's just a massive benefit.
Yep. And the same, and then they go not just with like children or people you're gonna for inheritance, but like for charities. Like, is the charity getting the most impact from your money, 30 years from now? Or would you be better off giving some, monthly, or giving a lump sum now when, maybe that money can compound for them and they can get the most impact out of it. So not just children, but also he touches on charity. So I thought that was also a good talking point.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he wrote this chapter because people accused him of being selfish, like not wanting to leave for his kids. But
Hmm.
the point is to be intentional with your money and have like actually have a plan for how you want to give your children or these charitable foundations money. Like, so you can set up trust,
Yep.
set up plans for when the money will be dispersed to them
Hmm.
and how, such that they get it when it's both, maximum benefit for them and
And in some
you know,
ways, for the parent, like if you're planning on giving a certain amount for your kid anyway, like wouldn't you almost prefer to see them be able to use it? Because like I feel
right.
like it probably would provide some sort of joy. I
Yeah,
mean,
out of
it
seeing
doesn't.
them.
Yeah, and I mean, he brings up it's not just about like just cash, but like it's all also about like providing experiences. Because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So, but like providing, yeah, good experiences for the ones you love. Um, okay. Anything else in that chapter?
Oh, no, I think that was
Okay, chapter 6 is balance your life. Don't live your life on autopilot. And this is essentially how do you balance the now with the future. Um, Now, one thing that this is the chapter where he brought up some of the savings curves, and he's basically saying when you're early on, like it's almost you don't really need to be saving because your salary's probably going to go up a good chunk, and you'd be better off saving when your salary's already higher because if you're skimping by early on, I mean, the impact is really not that great because you're not making that much. Um, and
which is
I
in
do remember hearing this a lot at U of M in undergrad, how the way these professors talk, they say like, you're going to make a lot of money. You might as well take out this and go out to eat anyway because you're going to make a lot of money. You're going to make it up. Um, and I remember thinking like, okay, I can kind of see it, but I do wonder a little bit about the habits it creates because this part in particular tends to go against some of the other books we've read and like The Richest Man in Babylon, a part of all you earn is yours to keep. Like that idea of like 10% of everything you get should be kind of saved away to perhaps build the habit because if you don't build the habit, then you might not be able to just switch it on later. So I'm a little bit I get what they're saying, and I actually did basically this because I remember my first job. Like I mean I was like worried about like even getting like a couple frappuccinos a week when I was like studying. So I'm like, you know what? No, I'm not saving anything. So I didn't contribute to my 401k at all. I basically didn't save that at that first job.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I feel like the problem with that, sort of like what you said, that mentality is you're right. Once you build a certain lifestyle, or the issue is not that you build like, that you're going to go out and enjoy your life. It's that usually your lifestyle will then increase with your earnings.
Hmm.
So like, if you're spending all your money when you don't make any money, you're probably going to be spending all your money when you make a lot of money, unless you're making just such a ridiculous amount that you can't spend it all.
Yeah.
But
I would say I don't want to pick on any type of person, but I've spent a lot of time around like doctors. And because they always have the thought early on that they're going to make so much, they do spend a lot, even if they're taking out debt, because they're like, what do I care? I'm going to be a doctor.
right,
But
yeah,
then when they become a doctor, they haven't really built up any of like the tracking, uh, I mean, perhaps budgeting skills, and they're kind of just like going with the flow on their money. They're not really paying attention. And they kind of they just spend. I I mean there are obviously there's doctors that do pay good attention to their money, but I found a lot of doctors in particular aren't great with their money or saving.
I remember there were a lot of med students I was friends with that, yeah, it was just like, what's another $10,000 loan, blah blah
Hmm.
blah. And then of course the girl I dated was like, we're gonna skimp and save every single,
Uh-huh.
literally everything. You know, that was my life for a long time.
Yep.
Um,
Um,
what did you think of? I feel like this. So he buckets like spending or your life in like the three categories: time, health, and money.
mhm,
And then he has this chart on page 116. I feel like we kind of talked about this, the ability to enjoy experiences based on health.
mhm,
So I was sort of interested to see this chart. I don't know how he's coming up with these graphs,
uh-huh.
but he essentially shows it that if you're active, he's saying your ability to enjoy experiences will more or less be the same at 45 as it is at 20 in terms of health, if you're like in good health.
Yeah.
But if you're in just um, but if you're in poor health, he puts it at about like 50%. But if you stay active and I guess eat well, like he doesn't really show that your health starts to diminish till about 55.
Hmm.
Uh, and then the rising wealth like that, he just more or less has going almost linear up.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I mean, I agree with this. Obviously, like being healthy, and I I don't know why I've been talking about this a lot, but uh the body positivity movement has come up a lot in some of my recent conversations, and it kind of ties in with this, where I was just saying like I think being body positive is fine, but you know, people have to accept that if being obese is like one of the leading causes of just, I mean, essentially just death. Like, I mean,
Uh-huh.
and if we're gonna say we're body positive and we're okay with people being like obese, then everyone needs to be okay with the downstream effect of that, which is just people dying like probably 20 years before they could and or should.
Hmm.
Uh, I personally don't think it's a great message.
Yeah, I would agree. He talks about compounding of bad health. I mean, it was kind of he brought up the point, like just having like 10 extra pounds is really not good for your joints.
Yeah.
And I think it comes out to like 40 pounds of force per leg, basically. Like if you're even just 10 pounds over, um, which is kind of scary to think about because I could make an argument that I'm about 10 pounds over where I should be. So that kind of got to me. Um, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I think he's just this chart. I don't know. I think it's you can kind of need to think about it in terms of the activity because there's definitely like some activities that I just don't. I wouldn't agree. Like, yeah, I can do this just as well as I did at 20. Like playing soccer is much harder.
So I mean, even talking to dad, I remember asking dad like a couple years ago. I was like, Dad, when do you think you're gonna retire? And it was sort of this like long roundabout like answer. And in the end, he kind of said like, I like to work and the stuff I really want to do, I can't really do like at the level that I would want to do if I wasn't working. Like he doesn't feel like he can really, he can obviously still shoot baskets, but he can't like go play pickup basketball with 30-year-olds anymore. It's
Uh-huh.
not, so you're saying like the things he really likes doing, he can't do at like the level that I think he would really want to do.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
And I think this gets to the point that he was kind of talking about it's not just like the day you die is your death, but you have like many deaths in your life. Like there's points where you just, you might not even know, but like, okay, this date, like that's the last pull up you're ever gonna do. Like you're for whatever reason something hurts, or like you're not gonna be able to do a pull up after that, or like your kids aren't gonna want to watch the Heffalump or
oh,
the Winnie the
yeah,
Pooh
the Pooh
movie.
movie.
That,
Yeah.
that's what he talked about. Yeah. So like from one day to the next, like you're like it's like parts of you are dying at different points. And that's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, that was an interesting point. You never know when something is your last time doing it.
Yep.
Um,
And that's why I think a lot of the people that have kind of the gratitude towards the sport they're playing, like, and they acknowledge that, this is not going to last forever. And you kind of need to, if you approach it that way, I think you're a little more happy and yeah, grateful that you're still able to do it.
very true.
Um, I mean, I guess I'll just throw out because I'm actually curious. I wrote down this note on this book you mentioned. It's called Eat to Live by Joel Furman. I think I might look into that because he talks about just yeah, just focusing on your health because the health is what helps you get or helps you enjoy experiences. So and another thing that I think we've talked about a little bit is just like in your mind, like deciphering between an expense and then an investment. Because like what he's saying is that it would a lot of people are worried about those end of life expenses, like the medical expenses, but people would be better off investing on the front end in their health. So you could, invest in good food, invest in, I don't know, certain massages or exercise or a personal trainer.
Yeah, it's like
So it's kind of like
preventative
switching
care,
it, yeah,
kind of.
switching it in your mind
Yeah.
from like, okay, is what I'm paying for an expense or an investment?
Yeah, it's better just to prevent illness than have to treat illness.
Yeah.
Because I think even insurance companies would say that because it's cheap. It's way cheaper
Yep.
to just not have to go through a treatment, pay a little bit more money up front than have to pay for someone to get a treatment, which is
And
why
then
insurance companies will always offer. I feel like I get offered like a $50 like gift card for getting a yearly checkup or
Uh-huh.
all
Or they'll pay
those
you, if you sign up for a
for
gym,
gym,
or
right?
I think I think mom gets points for sending pictures of the food she's
Food,
eating.
right? With
Yeah.
her and
So,
the that she's taking her pills.
yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Um, Chapter 7 was start to time bucket your life. Think of your life as distinct seasons. I don't know anything on
Yeah, I mean, I
you
feel like
go.
we've sort of talked about this. Like,
Mhm.
in a way, you just naturally, I feel like segregate your life. I feel like when you move a lot or move jobs a lot,
Mhm.
or in my case, even when I've been in different relationships, I've like thought about it. Like that period of my life was when I was dating such and such, and then, the next period of my life was when I was dating someone else, or, I was in grad school, like that was a period of my life. And now, like in my mind, I view myself as like I live in Alabama now, or I mean, I feel like in one episode you talked about how you used to view yourself as a soccer player, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
and probably not so much anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And like now I was the same way. And now I view like now I don't play soccer almost ever and I play pickleball all the time. So like that's kind of how I don't know. I feel like I'm still when I like think about this, I feel like I'm still in like my pickleball phase of my life.
Mhm.
Whether or not that will ever end, I don't know.
Mhm.
Uh
This
but yeah,
was, I think, um, yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, people do bucket their lives when they're looking back.
but this is more about bucking your lives forward
Yeah,
and
true,
what you
true.
want to do, what you want to like being intentional about like what do you want to accomplish in these given years. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I guess we would both be well, he doesn't have one, but we would both be around the 35 to 40-year-old bucket.
Yep.
And,
Yeah,
it's
this
like,
was an exercise where he just had you draw like a timeline with your age and then your expected death date, and then you can kind of arbitrarily, draw dashes to create buckets in like 5 or 10 year increments, and then write in what you want to experience in those buckets. So, any thoughts on the next 5 year bucket, Al?
yeah, I mean, I would still like to win a professional match.
Okay.
That's on my goal. I mean, I'd like to buy probably either one or two more houses as
Okay.
investment properties. Uh, I would like to move up in my career. Uh,
Okay.
and I would like to, yeah, at some point, get married, like have
Okay.
kids. Those are probably important. That's
Okay.
probably by the time I'm 40, those are kind of like on the horizon of like what I would want, like where I would want my life to be.
Okay. I had some similar. I put kids. I put adequate German. I put because I was also looking after reading this book. I looked at how many U.S. states I had been to, and I had been to 36. So I'm like, okay, over the next like 10 years, I think I want to cross all of them off. So like I put in like the next 5 year bucket, like 7 states I haven't been to yet. And then the next 5 years, I'd put another seven.
Yeah,
Um,
you know what state I don't think you've been to?
well, I haven't been to 14 of them.
You haven't been to what?
I haven't
Oh,
been to 14.
I was gonna say I don't think you've been to Mississippi.
I have not.
You know where Mississippi is really close to.
Alabama
That's right.
and Arkansas, right?
And Arkansas, yeah, it's
Pretty
true.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have to do that. I guess the only other part about this chapter is, and I think this was the same study basically that we discussed in the book Taking Stock by Doc G, which is that Australian caregiver that was interviewing people on their deathbed. And they said the number one regret of people is wishing they'd had the courage to live a life true to themselves. And the second biggest was, I wish I had not worked so hard. And that not work so hard is actually the top among males. Yeah. So just something to think about. So, okay. Um, Chapter 8 is Know Your Peak, know when to stop growing your wealth. And then, at some point, one needs to start drawing down their net worth. Otherwise, you'll never get to zero. Um,
So
so,
like, I guess I
mhm,
was thinking, I mean, he brings up, so he's saying you should peak more or less around like the accumulation of your net worth should end around 60, and then you should start spending down. I guess sort of what I was saying is like at a certain point, uh, I think
but
it
it's,
becomes it
uh-huh,
becomes harder to spend that amount of money, like unless you're
yeah.
just totally giving it away.
Mhm,
So unless you want to just, at that point decide to give your money to your children, which I think is, after reading this, I think is a good idea. It's difficult, I think, almost.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, he talked about, I think there was a guy, a trader that had just so much money, like he couldn't even, he couldn't spend it fast enough. And then he's
Like
also worried about like spoiling his kids
his kids.
somehow.
So well,
Um,
no, the story was he was like he wanted to stop when he made like $15 million, and then he made $15 million, and then it was like, okay, it's 30 million. And the next thing, I mean, the next thing in the story, he's got like $4 billion. And you're
yep.
right in that. And then he's worried about giving money to his children because he's worried that it will spoil them, which is something I recently heard Constant Kissin say that as well. He was worried about, I don't remember who he was interviewing, but he was saying like every dollar I make makes my son's life easier. He's
Uh-huh.
like worried about his son not living a life that builds challenges for him,
Hmm.
which I think is a real thing. Like 50 Cent talks about that too. If you can remember all the way back to the 50th Law, he talks about that. Or actually, I don't think it was the 50th Law. It was his other book. I think Hustle, whatever his
Hustle
biography
smarter,
was.
hustle harder, or
Harder.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah. He talked about like how his son, his son really struggled because he would just give his son all this money and just help them out all the time,
Uh-huh.
which I think is a true thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like he's when he says know your peak, he's more talking to an age, whereas a lot of people in the fire movement are kind of talking to a
A
dollar amount.
number. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the big difference here. Um,
But even when those with the fire movement, I remember when I first heard about it, I just remember thinking like these, I mean, I by no means lived the lavish lifestyle. But at the time I was like, man, these people like just don't, what do they do? Like,
uh-huh.
what's the point of the money if you're not gonna, the point of money just for the sake of money? It's like, what's the point? Like,
Yeah.
you need to find enjoyment out of it or do something with it.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, I guess
Yeah, and he's
so.
kind of talking through, yeah, how to make those decisions. Is one experience better now versus two in like 10 years, or with like the compounding, and kind of think about it through that, because like certain things you won't be able to do in 10 years. And yeah, it's this whole holistic view, incorporating your health, because yeah, your health is such a huge factor in experiences. Okay. Um, Chapter 9 is Be bold but not foolish. Take your biggest risks when you have little to lose. Um, and he's got this good quote that I wrote down: What's easy shouldn't determine what you do. So I
So,
thought that was a good quote.
I mean, I think this, I wish, I kind of actually wish uh, I kind of wish I would have read this chapter in particular like 15 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Uh, because I feel like at that point, like looking back, uh, I remember right when I moved to Nashville, Dad told me thought I should buy a house, and I was like, why? I can't buy a house. Like, why am I buying a house? Like, and if I would have listened to him, like that house at this point would be worth probably close to 4 times the amount. I think I probably would have gone into real estate a lot quicker.
Huh?
Uh, I just think I would be in a much financially better position. And the point is that, like, what seemed like at the time a massive risk, in reality, looking back on it, was not really a risk at all.
Mhm.
And I think that so often is the case, is like people think things are really risky when, I mean, maybe to some extent there's always some risk, but I don't think things are often as risky as people think.
Mhm.
Uh, and the point is to just take action. Like, I think if I would have just taken the action and done it, I would have learned about the process, and I'd probably have a lot more houses in Nashville, and I mean, I feel like I'm pretty well off now, but I think I'd just be a lot better. I'd financially be better off. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I wish I would have been a little bit bolder when I was 22. Because
Mhm.
there's that old Kiyosaki saying that says, no one ever goes broke from a $50,000 duplex. And I think
Okay.
that's pretty true.
I like that line. I forgot he said that. Um, I think another kind of thought experiment he talked about was like moving. Like if you're presented an opportunity to move for extra money, some people might be scared to lose touch with, he's saying like, three, four, five people in particular. And he's kind of walking through like how you would kind of think about the math of the decision, like how often do you actually see them? What is the price of a first class ticket, like on no notice to go back? Because that's like your worst case scenario in that at that point, like if you really wanted to go back to see them, like that's what you would be paying. Um, so yeah, it's just I feel like a lot of people do have some sort of loyalty to where they grew up, and it really might not be the best for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and we've talked about this a lot too. Um, so, and the last thing I wrote in this part was the business of life is the acquisition of memories.
I
And
think
I
that's a
guess
good
that's
quote.
basically sums up the book.
Okay. I don't know, Jack, any final thoughts?
I feel like I've kind of been living with some of these concepts, like, but not really, I hadn't really like articulated them or talked about, especially like the inheritance part and giving to charities. Um, but I do think if people actually mapped out that they would be able to maybe perhaps at least change course a little bit to where they maybe do have less stress in their life and are able to do more things now. And so I really enjoyed the book. Yeah, I would, I definitely am gonna try to incorporate some of this in planning. What about
Yeah, I
you?
mean, for me, the main takeaway I think was just being intentional.
Hmm.
I feel like I hear that a lot now. Just being intentional with how you act, what you're doing. Yeah, just be intentional, have a plan. I think if you have a plan, more often than not, things will probably work out for the best. Or
Hmm.
at least work out. Maybe not the best, but work out well.
Hmm. Yeah, I think we get maybe what I should have said is we get stuck in like yeah, like optimizing finances because you can kind of track it. Like it's easy to like look at a number on a spreadsheet and see like, oh yeah, it's going up, it's still going up, it's still going up. That's what I want. But like you're not really getting to the heart of what life should be like with maximizing experiences and thinking about what you actually want to experience.
I
So
mean,
that's
the phrase he uses in the book a lot is people live too much on autopilot.
yep,
It's just
exactly.
it's just people doing what they did yesterday because they did it yesterday, and
Hmm.
not, not taking their life by, the horns, per
Yep.
se.
Yep.
All right, Jake, you want to take us out?
Sure. With that said, please reach out to us at brothersonbooks@gmail.com for any book recommendations, or if you'd like to be a guest host for a particular book you have in mind. A great review or rating on whichever platform you're listening to this would be greatly appreciated. And lastly, if you can think of any friend, family member, or coworker that might like this episode, please pass it along. I'm Jack Allwild, and with me, as always, is my brother Alex Allwild. Al, it's been a great episode. And what are we reading next time?
We are reading Mind Mapping. I think I don't have the book with me,
It's
but
okay.
that is the book by Tom Knight. It's
It's
about how to improve your essentially cognitive thinking.
Yep. I was looking through it a little bit last night. It seems like it's got some cool
Diagrams.
tricks, cool exercises to do. And yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right,
Okay.
Jet.
Till next time.
Till next time.